They always do, because across the cold, ancient spiral arms of the galaxy, humans were small, young, no claws, no scales, no natural armor, no plasma breath, no hive mind intelligence spanning star systems, just soft skinned short lives and a blue-green world that barely registered on imperial star charts. So when humanity sent a single message across the quantum relays to the galactic empire of sovereign systems, the response was not fear, it was amusement. The message was simple, calm, almost polite. This region of space is under human protection. We advise you to stay far, far away. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had crushed war. They had enslaved star eaters. They had turned entire civilizations into footnotes in their history archives. And now a species that had barely learned faster than light travel was advising them. The High Council laughed so hard their translator drones had to stabilize their heart rhythms. So they did what empires always do. They sent a fleet. The first fleet never came back, not destroyed, not defeated. It simply vanished. No distress call, no debris, no energy signatures, just absence. The Empire assumed malfunction, statistical anomaly, maybe a spatial anomaly or rogue star collapse. So they sent a second fleet. This one did return, but only one ship. And when it emerged from hyperspace, hull was scorched black, its weapons melted into slag, and its crew, beings who had conquered 100 species, were silent. Not dead. Silent. They did not speak. They did not eat. They did not respond to light, sound, or psychic probes. Their minds were still there. But whatever they had seen had convinced them that words were no longer enough to describe reality. That's when the Empire began to listen. They demanded answers. Humanity responded with an invitation. Come, see why we warned you. So the Empire sent diplomats, not warships. And they arrived at the edge of human-controlled space and were met by a single vessel, not bristling with weapons, just ordinary. The human captain appeared on their holo display. She looked tired, older than her species should have been. And she said something that confused them more than any threat ever could. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your resources. We don't want your empire. She paused. We just want you to survive. That made no sense to them. So they followed her. The humans took them past battlefields, worlds where stars had been shattered into glowing dust, graveyards of fleets so massive they formed asteroid belts of twisted metal. They saw shattered megastructures, rings around stars that had been broken apart like glass. And on every world, on every ruin, there were the same markings burned into stone and steel alike, not a human language, but translated automatically. He's sure. V-E-G-L-T-A-L, and then the diplomats finally asked the question no one in the Empire wanted to ask. Who did this? The human captain didn't answer right away. Then she said, the things that live between galaxies. You see, humanity didn't rise in a peaceful galaxy. They rose in a haunted one. Long before the Empire ever ruled enough, there were things that hunted civilizations the way predators hunt herds. They didn't conquer. They harvested entire species, erased so thoroughly that not even their ruins remained. The Empire had never met them because humans had. Humanity didn't become strong by dominating the galaxy. They became strong by being the ones who stood in front of it. Every time the darkness came, humans fought it, not because they were the biggest, not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to let anyone else die in their place. Humanity's power was never born from towering weapons or blazing banners planted on conquered worlds, did not rise from thrones carved out of the silence of defeated enemies. It rose quietly in moments no one applauded, in choices no one recorded, in sacrifices that never made it into history books. Not because the people who made them didn't stay behind to tell the story. Real power is not the ability to make others kneel. Enough. It is the courage to stand when everything inside you is screaming to run. Every human carries this truth, whether they know it or not. You see it in the parent who stays awake through the night, exhausted, worried, afraid, but still whispering comfort to a child who doesn't yet understand what fear is. You see it in the friend who puts their own pain aside to sit beside someone else in silence, because sometimes presence is stronger than any advice. sacrifice. You see it in the worker who shows up day after day, not because the world celebrates them, but because someone else depends on them. That is the same strength that built humanity's place among the stars. Not conquest, not glory, but responsibility. In the vastness of the galaxy, humans learn something ancient and simple. If you are strong enough to protect, then you are strong enough to care. And if you are strong enough to care, then you cannot turn away. Sacrifice is not always dramatic. It is not always standing in front of a storm with a raised fist. Sometimes it is much smaller, quieter, harder. It is choosing patience when anger would be easier. It is choosing kindness when no one is watching. It is choosing to keep going when the world gives you every reason to stop. Humanity's power grew in those moments. Every time someone chose to help instead of ignore. Every time someone chose to stand and step aside. Every time someone chose to carry a burden that wasn't theirs simply because they could. That is how shields are forged, not in fire, but in will. In the story of the stars, humans did not become legends because they crushed their enemies. They became legends because they refused to abandon the helpless. Because when faced with darkness, they didn't ask, how do we win? They asked, who needs us to stay? And that question changes everything. In daily life, you stand at that same edge more often than you realize. Every difficult choice is a small battlefield. Every moment where you could walk away but don't is a quiet victory that shapes who you become. When you listen instead of dismiss. Enough. When you forgive instead of retaliate. When you try again instead of giving up. Those are acts of power. The world often tells us that strength looks like dominance. Enough. That winning means standing above others. But humanity's story, both in the stars and here on the ground, whispers a different truth. The strongest people are the ones who lift others up even when their own arms are tired. Sacrifice does not mean losing yourself. It means choosing something greater than yourself. It means believing that your actions matter, even when no one claps, that your presence can change a moment, a person, a path, simply by being there when it counts. And sometimes the greatest sacrifice is hope. Hope that your effort will mean something. Hope that your kindness will ripple outward. Hope that the world can be better because you decided not to be smaller than it asked you to be. Humanity's power, in the end, is not written in the ruins of conquered worlds. It is written in the lives that continued because someone stood in the way of the darkness and said, not this one, not today. And every day in ways big and small. Now, if you carry that same power, you don't need a battlefield. You don't need an audience. You don't need a galaxy watching. All you need is the choice to be the person who stays. Because in a universe that can be cold, loud, and unforgiving, the quiet act of sacrifice becomes the loudest declaration of all I am here. I care, and I will not walk away. That is the kind of power that doesn't fade with time. That doesn't rust or break or disappear. That power lives on in every person you help, every burden you share, and every moment you choose compassion over convenience. And just like the humans at the edge of the stars, when you stand like that, steadfast, willing, unyielding in your care, you become something more than strong. You become a shield, not just for others, but for the future itself. Keel and humans were never meant to be giants in the traditional sense. We were not born with claws sharp enough to tear through steel or bodies built to withstand the vacuum of space. We don't breathe fire, command storms, or bend the laws of physics with a thought. By every visible measure, we are ordinary. Soft hands, fragile bones. Hearts that can be broken by a single word as easily as by a single blow. And yet there is a moment, quiet, sudden, unmistakable, when something changes. It happens when someone else is in danger. In that moment, fear does not disappear, but it steps aside. Doubt doesn't vanish, but it grows quiet. Something older and deeper rises to the surface, something that has carried humanity through every dark chapter of its history. The instinct not to dominate, not to win, but to protect. You can see it in the smallest places. A child falls in a crowded street, and strangers who have never shared a name or a story move without thinking, forming a circle of hands in concern. A voice rises above the noise, asking if they're okay. A jacket is offered. A path is cleared. For a brief, powerful moment, the world rearranges itself around someone who needs help. That is what strength looks like in human form. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply acts. Everyday life is full of these quiet transformations. The tired parent who hears a noise in the night and gets up, even though every part of them wants to stay in bed. Enough. The friend who shows up at your door with no solutions, only time because they know shouldn't be alone. The coworker who takes the blame for a mistake they didn't make because they know someone else can't afford the consequences. In those moments, humans become something more than what they were a second before. We don't train for it, and we don't plan it. It simply happens. There is a switch inside it when someone else stands at the edge of harm, and suddenly our own comfort, our own safety, our own fear becomes secondary. We step forward not because we are fearless, but because the idea of doing nothing feels worse than the risk of doing something. Now, that is a different kind of strength, a quiet kind, a stubborn kind. It is the strength of holding a trembling hand in a hospital hallway, of standing between a bully and someone smaller, of speaking up in a room where silence would be safer, of staying when walking away would be easier. And the world rarely applauds these moments. There are no medals for listening, no trophies for caring, no headlines for choosing to protect instead of ignore. But these are the moments that build the invisible backbone of humanity. This kind of strength doesn't look impressive from the outside. It looks like a late night, a smile, a deep breath before a hard conversation. It looks like showing up again and again, even when you don't feel strong at all. That's the secret. Humans don't wait to feel powerful. They become powerful by acting in spite of how small they feel. In a universe that measures worth by size, by force, by how loudly you can make others move out of your way, humans measure worth by something else entirely. Enough. By who you stand beside when things go wrong, by who you refuse to leave behind. This is why when someone else is threatened, something extraordinary happens. The ordinary becomes exceptional. The fragile becomes fierce. The quiet becomes unmovable. A single person can become a wall. A single voice can become a warning. A single choice can become a turning point. And maybe you don't see yourself as strong. Maybe you look at your own life and see hesitation, uncertainty, moments where you wish you had been braver. That's part of being human too. But strength isn't the absence of those things. Strength is what you do while carrying them. It's the message you send when you don't know if it will be received. The apology you offer when pride tells you to stay silent. The hand you extend when you don't know if it will be taken. Every time you choose to protect, to stand with someone instead of stepping past them. Enough. You step into the oldest role humanity has ever known. The one who says, you defender, the one who faced this alone. You don't need a battlefield to be strong. You don't need a crowd to witness it. You just need a moment where someone else needs you more than you need your own comfort. And when that moment comes, when the world holds its breath for just a second, you will feel it, that quiet shift inside you, the place where fear makes room for courage, where hesitation makes room for action. That is when humans, so small in the vastness of everything, become something impossibly big. Not because they are the strongest, but because they choose to be. Ruling something means standing above it. Guarding something means standing in front of it. That difference is small in words, but enormous in meaning. The Galactic Empire built its power on maps and borders, on flags planted in distant soil, on names written into star charts and archives. They ruled by saying, this is mine. Humanity, on the other hand, learned to live by a different sentence. These must be protected. And that way of thinking doesn't start in the stars. It starts in the smallest, most ordinary corners of daily life. You see it in the way people walk a little closer to a loved one in a crowded place, not because danger is certain, but because safety feels better when it's shared. You see it in the way someone stays late to make sure a door is locked, a light is turned off, a problem is solved, not because they are in charge, but because they care about what happens when they leave. Rulers seek control. Guardians seek responsibility enough. To guard something is to accept that it matters more than you do in that moment. It is to say, if something goes wrong, let it come through me first. That is not a position of power in the traditional sense. It is a position of service, of quiet courage, of standing watch when no one else wants to. Every human knows this role, even if they've never named it. It's the older sibling who walks on the outside of the sidewalk closer to the road. The friend who waits until everyone gets home before they go to sleep. The teacher who notices the one student who's always silent and asks gently if everything is okay. None of these people rule anything, but they guard something precious. Humanity carried that same instinct into the vastness of the galaxy. While others counted systems and fleets, humans counted lives. While others expanded outward, humans leaned forward, placing themselves between what was safe and what was not. And guarding is not glamorous. It doesn't come with parades or monuments. Most of the time, it looks like nothing happened at all. And that's the point. The measure of a good guardian is not the battles they win, but the disasters that never arrive. In daily life, this kind of strength often goes unnoticed. The person who de-escalates an argument before it becomes a fight. The neighbor who checks in during a storm. The coworker who steps in when someone is overwhelmed, quietly taking on a little extra weight so the whole structure doesn't collapse enough. These moments don't make headlines. They don't change the world in loud, dramatic ways, but they change someone's world. And that is enough. And to guard something is to be constantly aware of what could be lost. It is to love something so deeply that you are willing to be tired for it, worried for it, challenged by it. It is choosing vigilance over comfort, presence over ease. Humanity's role among the stars wasn't chosen because they were the biggest or the boldest. It was chosen because time and time again, when something fragile stood in the path of something dangerous, humans were the ones who stepped forward and said, I'll take this. That same choice appears in your life more often than you think. It's there when you speak up for someone who isn't being heard, when you stand beside someone who's being judged, when you protect a moment of joy from being swallowed by cynicism, when you keep believing in someone who has stopped believing in themselves. Ruling would be telling them what to do. Guarding is staying with them while they figure it out. There is a quiet dignity in a kind of strength that doesn't need recognition, a form of leadership that doesn't stand at the front of the room, but at the edge, watching the door, making sure everyone inside is safe. The Galactic Empire ruled space by claiming it. Humans guarded it by caring about what lived within it. And in your own small corner of the universe, you do the same. Every relationship you protect, every promise you keep, every boundary you hold so something good can exist inside it. These are acts of guardianship. They say, this matters. They say, you matter. They say, I will be here when things get hard. And maybe no one thanks you. Maybe no one even notices. But the absence of harm, the presence of peace, the continuation of something beautiful, that is your quiet victory. Because ruling is about power over something. Guarding is about devotion to something. And in a world that often celebrates those who stand on top, there is something profoundly powerful about being the one who stands in front, the one who watches the horizon, the one who keeps the light on, the one who stays. That is the human way, not to own the universe, but to protect the part of it that needs protecting, one moment, one person, one choice at a time. Enough. Most people grow up believing that their greatest battles will be against other people, against rivals, against critics, against those who stand in their way and challenge their place in the world. We learn to measure ourselves against each other. Who is stronger? Who is faster? Who is smarter enough? Who stands higher on the ladder? But humanity, in its long story across the stars and across everyday life, learned a deeper truth. The real enemy is not the one standing in front of you. It is the darkness that waits behind all of us. The fear that tells you to stop trying, the silence that grows when no one reaches out, the emptiness that spreads when hope is left unattended. In the great sweep of the galaxy, this truth took the shape of vast, unknowable things drifting between stars. in daily life. Enough, it takes quieter, more familiar forms, loneliness, despair, injustice, the slow erosion of kindness in a world that moves too fast to notice when someone falls behind. And just like among the stars, humanity learned that fighting each other only makes those shadows stronger. You can see it in the smallest moments. Two people argue and the room grows colder, not because of the words themselves, but because connection begins to slip away. A community divides, and suddenly the real damage isn't who wins, but what gets lost in the process. Trust, understanding, the feeling of belonging. The horror isn't the disagreement. The horror is what grows in the space left behind when no one tries to bridge it. Humanity's quiet strength has always been in recognizing that the true battle is not about standing over someone else. It is about standing together against the things that would tear everyone apart. In daily life, this looks like choosing compassion over being right. Listening instead of interrupting, asking, "Are you okay?" instead of assuming you'll be fine. It's easy to see someone else as the obstacle. It's harder to see the shared struggle beneath the surface. Every person you meet is fighting something you can't see, worries they don't talk about, fears they don't show, questions they don't know how to ask. And the real enemy isn't that they are different from you. The real enemy is the world that makes them feel they have to face it alone. In the story of humanity, the stars didn't become a battlefield because of rival empires. They became a battlefield because of what happens when no one stands watch at the edge of the light, when everyone is too busy proving their own strength to notice something creeping in from the dark. That same edge exists in everyday life. It's there when someone stops showing up, when laughter fades from a familiar voice, when a friend grows quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they feel like no one is listening. Those are the moments when the real enemy is close, and the response doesn't require a weapon. It requires presence. It requires sitting beside someone even when you don't know what to say. It requires checking in, even when you're afraid of the answer. Feel enough. It requires being willing to care in a world that often tells you to keep moving. The greatest horrors don't always arrive with noise and chaos. Sometimes they arrive with silence, with indifference, with the slow, steady disappearance of connection. Humanity's answer, both among the stars and here on the ground, has always been the same. Reach out. Stand closer. Refuse to let the darkness have the last word. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means being brave enough to face what isn't. Together. In a world that teaches you to compete, choosing to cooperate is an act of quiet rebellion. In a world that rewards being loud, choosing to be kind is a form of courage. In a world that divides, choosing to understand is a kind of strength that no empire can measure. The real enemy thrives when people turn away from each other, when they decide it's easier to build walls than bridges, when they forget that behind every face is a story, and behind every story is a heart that wants to be seen. And so every small act of connection becomes a victory, a message sent just to check in, a hand placed on a shoulder, a moment of patience where Andrew could have taken over. These are the quiet battles humanity wins every day. You don't need to fight a monster in the void to be part of this story. You just need to notice the person in front of you, to choose empathy when indifference would be simpler, to choose understanding when judgment would be faster. Because the real enemy is never just theme. It is the cold that grows when no one cares. The distance that forms when no one reaches enough. The darkness that spreads when no one stands in the light. And every time you choose to be that light, however small, enough, however brief, you push back against something far larger than yourself. You remind the world that it doesn't have to be a battlefield. It can be a place where people stand together, not because they are the same, but because they refuse to let the shadows win. That is humanity's quiet, enduring victory, not over each other, but over the darkness that waits for us to forget who we are.